You already know this block. Everybody who's ever lived here knows it. The corner store with the flickering sign, the laundromat that never closes, the parking garage on 4th that nobody uses unless they got business with somebody. That's where Kwon Sung-hyun's world lives. Not in some office tower. In the wash cycles and the extra long green lights and the tow truck that never tows the wrong car. You don't see his name on anything, but the street knows. The street always knows. Renita Cole knew it better than anybody. 3 years running deliveries on this block, and she'd learned its language. Every idle engine, every face that stayed too long, every silence that meant something was about to move. That night, she clocked it in the first 20 seconds. A gray sedan parked outside the laundromat, engine running, windows up, nobody inside going in or out. That wasn't normal. That was a car waiting on a signal. But here's what you're probably thinking. Why not just call it in? Why not walk away? In this neighborhood, that's not how it works. Getting involved in Kwon's business had a price, and everybody on this block had watched somebody pay it. She kept walking, kept her eyes low, told herself it wasn't her problem, except it already was. Because the delivery she was holding, a food order nobody at that laundromat placed, had Kwon's name written on the slip in the manager's handwriting. Somebody had set up a reason for a stranger to walk straight up to him. And Renita realized, standing there under a busted streetlight, that staying out of it had always been the only rule that kept people alive on this block. She was about to break it. She didn't think. She moved. Renita cut across the street, delivery bag still in hand, and walked straight toward the laundromat door. Not slow, not careful, fast enough to look like she belonged there. That was the trick of this block. Confidence read as permission. Inside, Kwon sat at the folding table in the back, like he always did on Thursdays. 2 men flanking him who weren't folding anybody's laundry. She set the bag down loud enough to turn heads, and said the only thing that made sense in the moment. Wrong address. This ain't your order. It wasn't about the food. It was about buying 5 seconds. 5 seconds was enough. The gray sedan's engine cut off outside the signal, disrupted, because the man they were watching for wasn't the one who walked through that door. A woman did, and nobody in that car had a plan for a woman. The block noticed. Mr. Alvarez next door glanced up from his register. 2 kids on bikes slowed down without knowing why. The street was already becoming a witness, whether it wanted to or not. Kwon's men reacted first, hands moving toward jackets. But Kwon himself didn't move. He just watched her, the way a man watches something he can't yet explain. You're probably wondering how she knew. She didn't. Not fully. Not until the sedan peeled off 2 seconds too fast, tires screeching on a street where nobody speeds, not with cameras on every corner store. That was the mistake that nearly cost somebody everything, leaving too fast, too obvious, on a block that remembers every sound it's ever heard. This would later be the night people on this block called the night the delivery girl stopped it. Kwon's eyes lifted and found her across the room. The whole laundromat went still. She'd just done something in front of everyone, and on this block, everyone knowing meant nobody, including her, was safe anymore. By morning, the block had already rewritten the story a dozen times. Some said Renita saved Kwon's life. Some said she signed her own death warrant. Turns out, both were true. What nobody knew yet was who actually ran things on this street. Everybody assumed Kwon's men called the shots, the 2 at the folding table, the ones who flanked him every Thursday. But that wasn't the truth. The real order had come from somewhere else entirely. Somewhere outside the block. Somewhere Kwon's own security had never thought to look, because they were too close to see it. You're probably wondering how a man that careful missed something this obvious. Here's the answer. He trusted the wrong map. He watched every face on this street for 15 years. But the threat wasn't standing on the street. It was riding through it, in a car with plates that changed every stop, sent by people who studied his patterns instead of his neighborhood. This was the mistake that nearly cost him everything, believing the danger would always look like it belonged here. Renita didn't know any of that yet. All she knew was Mr. Alvarez wouldn't meet her eyes when she came in for coffee. All she knew was the corner boys who usually nodded at her now crossed the street instead. This was the moment the block made its decision about her, and it wasn't the decision she needed. Word moves fast on a street like this, faster than any phone call. By noon, Somebody Renita never met already knew her name, her route, and her shift schedule. The real danger hadn't ended in that laundromat. It had only just started watching her back. 2 days later, Kwon found her. Not at the laundromat. Not on her route. He found her at the one place she never expected, the loading dock behind the restaurant she delivered for every night, standing there alone like he'd been waiting an hour just to get 5 minutes of her time. She almost ran. But something in his face stopped her. Not threat. Not warning. Something closer to a man finally telling the truth after years of hiding it. "You didn't stop a robbery," he said. "You stopped an execution." That single sentence changed everything Renita thought she understood about that night. He told her, in pieces, what she'd walked into. The gray sedan wasn't random. It belonged to a network that had been circling his operation for months. Not rivals from another block, but something bigger, connected to people who moved through cities the way water moves through pipes, invisible until the moment they weren't. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. He told her the target wasn't random either. Somebody inside his own circle had leaked his Thursday schedule, somebody he trusted enough to never suspect. You might be asking yourself why a man like Kwon would tell any of this to a delivery driver. Here's the truth. Because she was the only person on this block with no reason to lie to him, and the only person smart enough to have seen it coming before his own security did. This was the decision that would later be known as the turning point, the night Kwon Sang-hyun decided the most dangerous person on his own street was also the only one he could trust. Renita understood, standing on that loading dock, exactly what kind of weight she'd just been handed. Knowing this made her valuable, but it also made her a target because in this world, information was worth more than money, and now she was carrying both. No one on this block realized how dangerous that knowledge would become, not even her. Renita went back to work the next night like nothing happened. That was the plan. Stay invisible. Stay routine. But routine wasn't an option anymore. Kwon started using her without asking, small errands disguised as delivery orders, routes rerouted through blocks that had nothing to do with food. Every drop-off became a message. Every message became evidence. He wasn't protecting her. He was building a paper trail only the street could read, one she was now carrying whether she wanted to or not. You're probably thinking she should have walked away right then. Here's the truth. Walking away wasn't safe either. Not anymore. Not once the block had seen her name attached to Kwon's business. What happened next changed everything. 2 nights later, a man Renita had never seen before started showing up on her route. Not threatening, not obvious. Just present, parked outside the gas station, standing near the bus stop, always somewhere she'd be. He wasn't watching Kwon. He was watching her. This was the moment the danger stopped being about protecting a mafia boss and started being about surviving what she now knew. The information Kwon handed her on that loading dock wasn't a gift. It was a target painted on her back, and everybody circling this situation understood that better than she did. No one warned her how fast this would spiral. No one could have. She kept walking her route anyway, delivery bag in hand, telling herself she could still turn back. But you already know that's not true. Some doors don't open twice. If you were in Renita's position right now, being watched, being used, and still not sure who's really protecting who, would you keep walking that route? Or would you disappear? Comment below. Because what she does next isn't just brave. It might be the last decision she ever makes on her own terms. 3 days after the stranger started following her, somebody new walked onto the block, claiming to help. Her name was Officer Denise Marsh, and she said she was there to protect Renita as a witness. Community liaison. Safety check-in. That's how she introduced herself. Badge out, voice calm, everything about her designed to feel like relief. But that wasn't the shocking part. Renita clocked something wrong within the first 60 seconds, the same instinct that saved Kwon's life in that laundromat. Marsh knew details she had no business knowing. Renita's shift schedule, her delivery route, details Kwon himself had only just learned. This was the moment everything shifted. Because if a stranger claiming to protect her already had that information, then someone on the inside had handed it over before Marsh even knocked on her door. You might be asking yourself, protect her from who, exactly? Turns out, Marsh wasn't there to protect anybody. She was there to remove her, quietly, under the cover of protocol. The same way Kwan's own people had almost missed the threat that started this entire nightmare, because it looked official. And official things don't get questioned on a block like this. Renita didn't call her out. She smiled, thanked her, said she'd think about the safety program. Inside, her stomach had gone cold with the truth she couldn't say out loud yet. The people circling her weren't split into two sides anymore. Kwan's enemies. Kwan's protection. Now there was a third player, wearing a badge, walking her own street like she belonged there. No one on this block had prepared for that. Marsh smiled back, turned, and walked toward a car parked exactly where the gray sedan had waited that first night. Same spot, different car, same silence. Renita watched her drive off and understood, with a certainty that scared her more than anything. Kwan had told her this wasn't almost over. It was only getting started. Renita didn't sleep that night. She sat on her fire escape, watching the block, replaying Marsh's face over and over until she found what she'd missed the first time. Marsh's badge number didn't match the district that patrolled this street. Small detail. Almost nothing. But almost nothing was exactly the kind of thing this block had taught her to notice. This was the moment Renita understood she couldn't fight this quietly anymore. Whatever was circling her Kwan's enemies, this fake officer, whoever was pulling strings above both of them, none of it would stay hidden if enough people were watching at once. So she did something nobody expected. Not Kwan, not Marsh, not even herself. 20 minutes earlier. She went live, not to expose anybody by name. She wasn't reckless. She filmed herself walking her regular route, talking casually about her night, her deliveries, her block, and let the camera catch what it caught. The gray sedan's replacement, parked in the same spot. Marsh's car, idling 2 streets over. All of it, folded into what looked like nothing more than a young woman documenting her evening for a few hundred followers. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. Within an hour, comments started rolling in from people on the block, neighbors tagging the same cars and photos from weeks earlier, confirming patterns Renita didn't even know existed until strangers connected them for her. She hadn't just documented a threat. She'd built a public record that nobody could quietly erase. This was the decision that would later be called the moment she stopped being a target and became a witness the whole city could see. Kwan didn't know yet, neither did Marsh, but somewhere, someone monitoring all of this understood exactly what had just happened, and the clock they thought they controlled had just run out of hiding room. By the next morning, Kwan summoned her. Not through a delivery order this time, through his own people, standing outside her building before sunrise, waiting to walk her to a restaurant 3 blocks over, the one everybody on this street understood was his, even though his name appeared on nothing. You're probably wondering why she went. Here's the truth. Staying home wasn't safer anymore. Nowhere was. Inside, Kwan sat alone at a corner table. No folding chairs, no guards flanking him this time. Just him, a pot of tea, and an expression that told her he already knew about the video. You didn't ask me first, he said. Didn't think I needed permission to survive, she answered. That single exchange changed the entire balance between them. He told her Marsh wasn't police, never had been. The badge was real, stolen from a retired officer's file, repurposed by people with enough reach to make paperwork disappear before anyone checked twice. Whoever sent her wasn't interested in protecting Renita. They were interested in what Renita now knew. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. Kwan admitted something he'd never said to anyone on this block. The operation targeting him wasn't local anymore. It reached into departments, agencies, structures people were taught to trust without question. The video Renita posted hadn't just protected her. It had accidentally exposed a piece of something far bigger than one street, one boss, one bad night in a laundromat. No one warned her how far this actually went. No one could have. Renita sat across from a man the whole neighborhood feared, realizing she now held more danger in her phone than Kwan held in 15 years of running this block. This was the turning point, the moment protecting herself and protecting him became the exact same fight. Kwan studied her face for a long moment, then said the words that ended their meeting. You're not safe until they think you know less than you do. Renita didn't respond. She already knew that ship had sailed the second she hit record. 2 days after that meeting, Kwan called her back to the restaurant. This time he didn't sit across from her. He slid a phone across the table instead. "Watch this before you decide anything else," he said. Renita hesitated, but she'd already crossed too many lines to stop now. The video showed a meeting she never should have seen. Men in suits, not street clothes, sitting in a room that looked nothing like this neighborhood glass walls, city skyline behind them, the kind of view people on this block only see from a bus window heading somewhere else. And in the corner of that footage, barely visible, stood the same face Renita had seen parked outside her gas station 3 nights earlier. This wasn't a rival crew fighting over territory. This was never about one block, one boss, one bad night in a laundromat. You're probably thinking this whole time it was a street war. It wasn't. What Kwon showed her connected his restaurants, his laundromats, his parking garages to a network moving money through cities most people on this block would never visit in their lifetime. And the men targeting him weren't protecting a rival's turf. They were protecting something bigger than turf, something that stretched into offices with names on the door, agencies with badges people were taught never to question. This was the moment everything Renita believed about that first night collapsed into something far more dangerous. The gray sedan wasn't hired muscle. It was a small piece of a machine built to erase anyone who got too close to what Kwon actually knew, and now she'd seen it too. No one warned her how deep this actually went. No one could have, because the people who built this didn't leave warnings. They left silence and bodies and blocks that stopped asking questions a long time ago. Kwon watched her face as the video ended. "You understand now why they sent someone wearing a badge," he said quietly. "A street fight. You fight in the street. But this, they fight in silence. And silence is winning." Renita sat there, phone in her lap, feeling the full weight of what she now carried. If this story has your heart racing right now, you need to see how far this actually goes. Because what Renita uncovers next isn't just about one man's survival. It's about every person on that block who thought staying quiet kept them safe. Subscribe now, because the next chapter reveals exactly who's been watching this entire neighborhood from the very beginning, and you will not see it coming. 3 nights later, a woman Renita had never seen approached her at the bus stop. No badge, no introduction, just a folder, held out like it weighed nothing, and everything at the same time. "My name is Agent Dana Ferris," she said. "I've been trying to reach Kwon Sang-hyun for 6 weeks. Every route I take gets blocked before I arrive." This was the moment the story split wide open. Ferris wasn't part of whatever sent the fake officer to Renita's door. She was federal, legitimate, and she'd been chasing this same network long before Renita ever picked up a delivery bag that Thursday night. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. Ferris told her the badge officer Marsh had been flagged 3 separate times by internal review, each report buried before it reached anyone with real authority to act. Somebody inside a legitimate department was protecting the exact people Ferris had spent years trying to expose. You might be asking yourself how a federal agent gets blocked from reaching a witness. Here's the answer: when the people blocking her sit inside the same structure she reports to. Renita realized, standing at that bus stop with strangers walking past her, like this was just another ordinary night, that she was no longer caught between a mafia boss and his enemies. She was standing in the middle of a war between the truth and the people paid to bury it. Ferris asked for one thing, only a way to reach Kwon directly, off any record, before Marsh's people finished whatever they'd started. This was the decision that would later be known as the moment Renita chose a side she never asked to be part of. She took the folder. "I can get you to him," she said, "but you need to understand something first." Ferris leaned in. "Once I do this, there's no walking either of us back out quiet." Renita's video didn't stay small for long. By the following morning, a junior tech at the local news station, a nobody named Curtis Yang, 23 years old, 2 months into the job, flagged the footage while scrolling through community tags for an unrelated segment. He wasn't looking for a conspiracy. He was looking for local color, a feel-good clip about neighborhood watch culture. Instead, he noticed the plates. 2 different cars, 3 weeks apart, both parked outside locations tied to Kwon's businesses. Both registered to a leasing company that didn't exist anywhere except on paper. This was the moment a stranger with no stake in any of it accidentally cracked open what powerful people had spent years keeping sealed. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. Curtis did what any cautious employee does. He forwarded it up the chain to a supervisor who had absolutely no connection to Marsh, to the leasing company, or to whatever agency was protecting this operation from the inside. That supervisor forwarded it further, to an oversight desk built specifically to catch exactly this kind of pattern. Nobody planned for this. Nobody who built this operation accounted for a 23-year-old doing his job a little too well. You're probably thinking a system this dangerous would have covered every angle. It hadn't. It counted on people staying quiet, on evidence disappearing before anyone credible saw it. It didn't count on a live video from a delivery driver's phone, reaching someone with nothing to lose by asking questions. This was the mistake that would later be known as the crack in the wall. Small, almost invisible, and completely unstoppable once it started spreading. Somewhere in a building with no windows, a phone rang with news nobody wanted to deliver. The flag had been escalated. The clock everyone thought they controlled had just started moving on its own. Renita didn't know any of this yet. She only knew Ferris hadn't called back in 2 days, and silence like that had never once meant good news on this block. Ferris finally called at 4 a.m. "They're moving tonight," she said. "Whatever they were planning to do quietly, they're doing it fast now, because they know the flag reached oversight." Renita sat up in the dark, heart already ahead of her thoughts. This was the moment the entire operation stopped being careful, and careful was the only thing that had kept everyone alive this long. Ferris explained it in short, clipped sentences, the kind people use when there's no time left for anything else. The people behind Marsh had 2 options: wait for oversight to shut them down, exposing everything, or finish what they started before that happened. They chose speed over caution. You might be asking yourself what finishing actually meant. Here's the answer nobody wanted to say out loud. Kwon wouldn't survive the night if this played out the way it was designed to. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. Ferris was still 6 blocks away, boxed in by traffic that felt too convenient to be accidental. The oversight escalation Curtis triggered hadn't fully closed the case, yet it was moving, but moving through channels too slow for tonight. Renita had minutes. Kwon had the same minutes. And the only person positioned to do anything about it was a delivery driver standing in her kitchen in pajamas, holding a phone with a dying battery and a folder full of evidence that meant nothing if nobody survived long enough to use it. This was the decision that would later be called the point of no return. The night speed and silence collided, and only one side could win. She grabbed her jacket. No plan, no backup. Just the same instinct that pulled her into that laundromat weeks earlier, the one that had never once been wrong about what this block was trying to tell her. Outside, her building's street was empty, in a way it never was at 4 a.m. No corner boys, no late walkers, nothing. The silence wasn't peace. It was the sound of a neighborhood holding its breath, because somewhere close by, the countdown everyone feared had already begun. Renita reached the restaurant before Ferris did. Kwon was already outside, standing on the sidewalk like a man who'd decided running wasn't worth the energy anymore. 2 black cars sat parked across the street, engines running, doors still closed, waiting. This was the moment Renita understood something Kwon's own security never fully grasped. This street belonged to her, not them. Every alley, every blind spot, every door that looked locked, but wasn't. 15 years of watching this block hadn't taught him what 3 years of walking it every night had taught her. "Get inside," Kwon said. "Now." She didn't move. "You get inside," she said. "I know a way out that isn't on anybody's map." You might be asking yourself how a delivery driver outsmarts a trained security detail in the middle of an active threat. Here's the truth. Those men were watching the street the way outsiders always watch it. For cars, for guns, for anything that matched what they expected danger to look like. They weren't watching the laundromat's back hallway, the one that connected through 3 buildings and led out 2 blocks over, the one Renita had used 100 times to avoid rain, to avoid traffic, to avoid nothing more dangerous than being late for a shift. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. The moment they moved through that hallway, Renita made one call, not to police, not to Ferris, but to the small community radio station 3 doors down, the one that broadcast block news to a few hundred listeners every night. She said only one sentence on air. "Something's happening outside the restaurant on 4th, everybody. Step outside your door right now." This was the decision that would later be known as the moment the whole block became a witness at once. Doors opened. Porch lights flicked on. People who'd learned to look away for years suddenly couldn't stop looking. The two black cars couldn't move on a street full of open doors and phones already recording. Not without every face on this block seeing exactly what they were. Kwan walked out beside her in full view, the negotiation over before anyone in those cars could act on it. No one dared finish what they started, not with the whole neighborhood finally watching. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. That silence was the loudest thing Renita had ever heard. Then one of the black car doors opened, and Marsh stepped out, no badge this time, no introduction, just a stare aimed directly at Renita like she'd expected this exact standoff from the very beginning. "You should have stayed out of it," Marsh said. "Funny," Renita answered. "Everybody kept telling me that. Nobody explained why staying out of it meant somebody else got to decide who lives." This was the moment two completely different worlds collided in the open, stripped of every badge, every cover story, every polite explanation either side had used until now. You're probably thinking this ends in gunfire. It doesn't. Not because anyone hesitated, but because something Marsh's side never accounted for arrived at the exact same second. Ferris's car turned onto the block, followed by two unmarked federal vehicles Renita had never seen before. Not because Ferris called for backup in time, because the oversight flag Curtis triggered 11 hours earlier had finally caught up to real time, faster than anyone predicted, slower than anyone needed, arriving in the one instant that mattered most. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. Marsh's own people, the two men who'd been sitting in that car the entire standoff, didn't move to protect her. They watched the federal vehicles arrive and made a choice Renita didn't expect. They stayed exactly where they were, hands visible, faces blank. This was the moment loyalty inside Marsh's operation cracked wide open. Nobody in that car was willing to die protecting an order that had already failed. Marsh understood it too. Her whole plan hadn't collapsed because of superior force. It collapsed because an entire block of people who were never supposed to matter had already made themselves impossible to ignore. Ferris stepped out, badge raised, voice steady. "Step away from the vehicle. No one on this block will forget what happened in the next 10 seconds. Marsh's hand inching toward her jacket, Renita's breath catching, Kwan stepping half a step in front of her without anyone asking him to. Then Marsh stopped. She looked around at every open door, every phone raised, every face this operation had spent months trying to keep in the dark. There was nowhere left to hide the truth. She lowered her hand. Marsh was arrested on the sidewalk that night, in front of every open door on the block. By morning, the story had already spread past this neighborhood federal agents, a leasing company built entirely on paper, a network stretching through cities most people here had never visited. The block that watched it happen didn't need a news report to understand what it had witnessed. This was the moment the Operation Kwan spent 15 years surviving finally collapsed, not because of superior firepower, but because one delivery driver refused to look away. You're probably wondering what happened to Renita after that night. Here's the truth. Nothing about her life went back to normal, and nothing about it stayed the same either. Federal investigators questioned her for 3 straight days. Ferris sat beside her through every session, the same folder from the bus stop now thick with evidence Renita's video had helped uncover. She answered every question with the same steady calm that got her through that laundromat, that loading dock, that 4 a.m. walk toward a restaurant she never should have reached in time. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. 6 weeks later, Curtis Yang, the 23-year-old who flagged 2 mismatched license plates without knowing what he'd started, received a formal commendation from an oversight board that still didn't fully understand how close this operation came to disappearing into silence forever. Renita received something quieter, a single message from Ferris sent the day Marsh's case officially closed. Kwan wanted you to know the block held, all of it, because of you. No parade, no headline with her name in it, just a neighborhood that finally exhaled. This was the ending nobody expected when it started with a gray sedan parked too long outside a laundromat. Not a rescue, not a takedown, but a single woman proving that invisibility, the very thing this world used to overlook her, was the most dangerous thing anyone in that operation never accounted for. Kwan still runs his restaurants, his laundromats, his parking garages. But everyone on this block knows something shifted that week, the balance of who really holds power here. And Renita still walks that same route every night, delivery bag in hand, watching every idle engine, every face that doesn't belong. Because now she knows something the rest of the world is just finding out. If this story kept you up wondering how far you'd go to protect a stranger, subscribe right now, because the next block, the next boss, the next impossible night is already waiting, and you do not want to miss what happens when the street decides to fight back again.